Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today to kick off our ASEAN #Upskill with AU teacher training series. My name is Elodie Journet, Australian Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner to the Philippines and Micronesia, and I will be your MC today. Also hosting with me today are my Austrade, Manila and Jakarta education colleagues, Ms. Grace Alcon, Ms. Kimberly Cuesta, Ms. Aswini Sudiani, Mr. Nico Alexander, and Mr. Aris Pratama. Before we get started, I'd just like to run you through a few housekeeping items. To reduce background noise, the audience has been muted. We would like to also request our speakers to please keep your microphones muted when you are not presenting, but kindly keep your cameras on. Please also note that audio quality may fluctuate during the webinar. During the session today, please make sure you have a pen and paper with you, as our academic colleagues presenting today will be asking you to write down your thoughts and design a tool. If you have any tech questions about the WebEx platform regarding your audio, please send them to my colleagues Grace Alcon, Aswini Sudiani, or Chin Chin through the chat box function. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to ask your questions throughout the webinar. In order to ask a question, simply type it into the chat space as shown on the slide and kindly direct it to Dr. Jared Carpendale of Monash University. Jared will then collate all your questions and request our academics to address the key themes at the end of the presentations. Please note that Austrade is recording this webinar and may make the recording, including all the audio and the visual elements, accessible to internal Austrade staff and to the general public via our austrade.gov.au website and through other means of communications. Attendees who are not in agreement may exit the webinar now. An handout of today's presentation will be available to everyone after the webinar series is completed. I would now like to call on my colleague, Mr. Tim Martin, Trade and Investment Commissioner, Austrade, Indonesia, and ASEAN Lead for Education, to formally welcome everyone.
Thank you very much, Elodie, and welcome everyone to Austrade's inaugural ASEAN Teacher Training Initiative. I'd like to formally welcome the Australian and ASEAN education stakeholders joining us today. And I see the numbers are phenomenal. We've got around 800 participants on this webinar so far. Today's session is the first of 4 training webinars delivered by Austrade and our Australian university partners, Monash University, the University of Queensland, the University of Western Australia, and the University of Sydney over the coming week. If you haven't yet signed up for the other 3 events, please register via Austrade's website. Well, it's been nearly 8 months since the beginning of global lockdowns as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has meant restricted travel and closing government offices and schools across ASEAN countries. Like the Australian government and Australian universities, you may have already adapted to the new environment of doing business or delivering classes virtually. We're very happy to have this platform to engage with you and to bring to you this training series. If I could just ask everyone to go on mute. Thank you so much. Well, there's still a bit of background noise. If I could just ask you to mute, please. I might continue then, and hopefully you can hear me, but the Austrade ASEAN education team has done a tremendous job to put together the teacher training webinar series, focusing on the current impact of that pandemic to education. Together with the Senior Trade Commissioner, Elodie, from the Philippines, our MC, and our education managers from across the region, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, we're all very happy you could join us for this training workshop today. Now, raising the quality of education is a priority for every ASEAN country. Gaps in various education systems across ASEAN have never been more apparent than during this period. Through our teacher training series, you'll hear from Australian education leaders in innovative pedagogies and training and teaching methodologies for STEM and English language. and have opportunities to discuss how teachers can effectively utilise digital tools in classrooms, which, as we know, is a necessity in this new COVID environment. Australia maintains the highest standards for teacher training, and we have 2 national regulatory and quality agencies for international education: the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency, or TEQSA, and the Australian Skills Quality Authority, or ASQA. These agencies were established by the Australian government to monitor quality and regulate university and non-university education providers. Australia has over 700,000 international students, with over 22,000 courses across over 1,000 education institutions. The universities that you'll hear from during this webinar series are ranked among the world's top 200 universities, and certainly Australia's top 10 universities. For the workshop today, the Monash University experts will be focusing on the current skills gaps in content integration and the associated pedagogies that lead to optimal learning outcomes for students. You'll hear more about the approach and process from our Monash University colleagues in a little moment. Now, ASEAN is an important education partner for Australia. 5 countries in ASEAN are currently within Australia's top 20 source countries for student enrolments: Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia. English language, or ELICOS as we call it, is a key program that students from these markets choose Australia for, owing to our strong capability in this area. And we're also seeing a significant interest for innovative education technologies from ASEAN schools, and over the past year alone, Austrade has supported a number of Australian edtech companies, education technology companies, to connect with schools across ASEAN. Skills are also an important element that Australia has tremendous capability to share. And in this context, retooling and reskilling our teachers for an innovative learning delivery is something that Austrade and the Australian government and our Australian education partners are helping to address. Before I finish, I would like to say to our ASEAN educators joining the webinar today, we understand that it's critical to maintain focus on education continuity, while also providing innovative and engaging ways to connect with students. And with this in mind, please do take the opportunity over this webinar and the 3 webinars to follow to actively engage with the speakers, and also to reach out to Austrade after the sessions if you have any questions. I wish you all an enjoyable and productive session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim, for this welcome address. And I can see that now we've reached numbers of 1,000 attendees, so it's fantastic to see. So now on to our masterclass. So we are honored for this first webinar to be joined by the following key academics from one of our leading Australian universities, Monash University. So together with us, we have Professor Gillian Kidman, Associate Professor and STEM researcher and educator. So Gillian's base subjects are science, mathematics, and geography, and she has taught and researched digital technologies. Her expertise is in inquiry-based teaching and learning and in the integration of science and mathematics, especially the disciplinary and transdisciplinary thinking of STEM. Gillian has actually won awards for her teaching and curriculum design in inquiry-based learning and teaching in the sciences, and has done extensive research in STEM education and design of the Australian science curriculum. Our second speaker will be Dr. Joanne Lenin, Senior Lecturer in Digital Transformations. In the past 5 years, Joanne has supported more than 400 schools in Victoria, Australia to engage with technologies in STEM for their own and their students' learning. Joanne holds a doctorate of education focused on teachers' use of technologies for learning. Having taught in both the private and the public sectors, Joanne researches and presents internationally on digital technologies and digital pedagogies in STEM. Our first speaker will be Dr. Hazel Tan, lecturer. Hazel's areas of research and teaching interest are in secondary mathematics education, educational technology, and international comparative studies. Her research methodological expertise is in quantitative and mixed methods, and her work on Facebook as a recruitment tool for research has gained academic interest. Before moving into academia, Hazel worked as a senior secondary mathematics teacher and head of mathematics department, and as an educational technology officer for the Singaporean Ministry of Education. Finally, we have Dr. Jared Carpendale, lecturer. Jared comes from a secondary school background where we taught science, chemistry, physics, and electronics. His research and expertise in effective professional learning for teachers in STEM to support their development of pedagogical content knowledge and how schools are integrating STEM education in their curriculum. Jared's current research projects include understanding the experiences of highly skilled teachers from professional development settings, and also how teachers are integrating STEM education into their school curriculum. So with that, I'll now hand you over to Monash University and to Gillian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elodie, for your welcome. And I would like to point out where we are here in Australia, right down the bottom of Australia at Melbourne. And I would like to extend a very big thanks to everybody who has turned up here this afternoon and this evening. I wish to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations, from whose land we are presenting today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. As a brief explanation as to why I make this acknowledgement to our elders, it is because I value and recognise Australia's traditional owners and their customary place within Australian society today. You see, the Indigenous peoples of Australia have a very rich culture and heritage, and for thousands of years they have welcomed visitors from other lands and other country. By making the acknowledgement of country on your behalf, I show that we, as learners, have respect for and acknowledge the traditional owners of the Australian continent and their customs. I thank all of our collective traditional owners for the lands upon which we all learn today and in the future. Next slide, please. So in the presentation today, we'll be exploring design using STEM thinking. Jo will be explaining 4 strategies for using this particular pedagogical type when teaching online. Hazel will then share with you a model for design learning and assist you to do a design using STEM thinking activity. Jared will conclude the presentation with a reflection of the key ideas and also be responsible for serving out the questions. Next slide, please. Now, in the presentation, we will be advocating for the use of design using STEM thinking in your subject area. Maybe you teach economics or history, or is it geography? Maybe even mother tongue language. Design STEM thinking can be used in all subjects. There's a very important message and understanding about this topic. And this is that we are not suggesting you teach science, mathematics, or technology instead of your subject area. We do not want you to teach STEM instead of your subject. We do not want STEM inside your subject. So what we show on this diagram is the incorrect understanding of design using STEM thinking. Next slide, please. This is the correct diagram. Have a look. Over on the left, we have science, technology, mathematics, all together, intersecting, and being housed within engineering activities. That is STEM. And right in the middle, where the diagrams of the circles from science, mathematics, and technology intersect, is where we find STEM thinking. Now, it's that STEM thinking, just the characteristics of how we plan, how we collaborate, how we use team skills, how we build something from a piece of cardboard or an old stick. It's that creativity that we want you to take from STEM and move that into your subject area. Also, in this diagram, we have the student as the centre of the design process. The student's behaviour in your class will be creative. It will move the knowledge that you have given them about your subject area into a new area because they'll be able to apply it. They'll be able to see this is what it means in the real world. You'll find that on that diagram, we've listed a few of your curriculum areas. We've got Curriculum 2013 from Indonesia. That curriculum specifies that higher order thinking skills must be used. It's a STEM thinking. Design using STEM thinking is HOTS education. We've got the K-12 basic education, which specifies inquiry practices coming from the Philippines. We've got competencies coming from Vietnam and also coming from Malaysia. We have the 21st century skills. Your curriculum asks you, mandates you and the rest of your teachers to actually use design using STEM thinking. Maybe they're asking under a different name, but it's there, and the expectation is you can take it, use it in your subject area to engage and to improve the learning of your students. In our work, we also use a cultural focus so that students look at their everyday practices, what they see in their world, in their homes, around them all the time, but they see it from a different perspective. Using a scenario building focus, we ask the students to visualise a more sustainable everyday practice in order to allow people to imagine their possible futures. So that's what we're recommending in our session tonight. We want you to take that special type of creative thinking, maybe it's called HOTS, maybe it's inquiry, maybe it's competencies. You take that from STEM and you move it into your own subject area. It will enhance your teaching and it will enhance the learning of your students. In today's presentation, you'll get the opportunity to design using STEM thinking yourself, and you'll be able to think aloud. Now, think aloud, you might say, oh, what do we mean? Thinking aloud is just saying what you're doing in your mind. You'll be doing it with somebody else. You'll be collaborating. So it becomes that discussion. By thinking aloud, the student has to clarify what their ideas are. The student has to defend their ideas. They have to explain what they mean. And it's a very, very powerful learning opportunity. Go on. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand over to Jo now, and she will take you through the 4 strategies for online STEM pedagogies. Thanks, Jo.
Thanks, Gillian, and good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to have so many of you here, and we always love to engage with passionate teachers from all around the world, so thank you for being here. Following on from Gillian's presentation and her explanation of how we think about STEM and how that transfers into your areas, I want to bring another layer, and I want to talk to you about what the online world can offer. And of course, so many of us, if not all of us, have had to engage in the online world this year. Indeed, here in Victoria, schools only went back this week and have had 7 months off of learning. And so the online space is somewhere that we can capitalize on to understand what students are thinking and doing, and to provide them spaces to demonstrate that flexible thinking, those higher order thinking skills and the competencies that Gillian was talking about. So I'm going to walk you through 4 ideas that you may know, or they may give you another perspective on tools you already use. And these can be used anywhere where there is internet connection. They are not dependent on a specific operating system or device. And the resources I'm suggesting here are also free to access. And so I think that's important so that we can ensure some equity of access, no matter if a student is working on a 10-year-old smartphone or a brand new Windows computer. So on the next slide, we will have a look at our first activity. And this uses a resource called Poll Everywhere. And what I want to do with this resource is to ask you to think about how do you use visuals to engage students and ask them to demonstrate their thinking in the online space. And this resource called Poll Everywhere is one way of doing that. You can see the green arrows pointing to markers. So this was an activity in a classroom where we asked students to try and understand their own learning preferences and identify where they would work in a space like this and to think about why. And so they explain where they drop these markers. There are a lot of benefits to engaging in the visual. It limits the amount of text that needs to be created, which can often be quicker. It enables students to have an equal voice. So there's no student who writes twice as much as another. It allows them to engage in that. Using visual imagery and asking for feedback on it also means that we can identify areas that we might need to discuss further. We can use diagrams. So if you were in geography, you could use a map, which we're going to do shortly. If you were in maths, you can use an equation or a number. If you're working in history, you could have an image of a timeline, for example, and ask students to identify certain areas. So using diagrams or plans or images, we can ensure that students are able to not only give feedback, but also to demonstrate their thinking and put their ideas out there. So what I'm going to do is in the chat, you will see that there is a link and you will be able to click on that link and you are asked to have a go at this kind of virtual visual feedback activity. So we're going to put on the screen the website that will show your responses as you click. So please click on the link in the chat. I know there's a large number of us, but we should be fine. And you can either just have a look or you can participate. And this is a geography activity that will be coming up. Great. So what we can see here, all those green markers are from the 1,200 of you that are currently in our webinar. So you can see up here, I've asked the students, which in this case is you, I've asked them to identify a country in the Ring of Fire basin of the Pacific. And you have 4 chances. That means you get to put 4 markers down. And what we can do here is we can, as a teacher, we can evaluate our learning and our teaching. So we can see here that some students may have some misconceptions, and we can see that some students understand what's going on, this concept. So here we've used a map. It might be, we might do this to revise a concept. We might do this to be able to position our teaching, but it allows students to engage with each other and see what others think and put their thinking forwards. So thank you for those who contributed there. We are going to head back to the PowerPoint and have a look at a couple of other ideas. While that's loading, I hope that gave you an idea of what we can do in the online space that isn't direct instruction. And we know that best practice teaching contains a carefully considered mix of direct instruction and peer-to-peer learning and active learning processes. So it's one way to get students to be a little more interactive in the virtual space that can encourage STEM thinking. If we head to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about videos because I'm sure many of you have used videos during the COVID pandemic to engage with your students. And what a wonderful resource it has been. It means that we can create a video and send it to our students and they can see us and hear us. There are many benefits of video, of course, one of which is that there is a play and a pause and a rewind button. And we're increasingly getting research that supports the idea that being able to rewind and re-watch a video helps students solidify their understanding. So there's some cognitive science theory behind that emerging that makes it really important. One of the things I want to point out is that videos are not lectures. So in the online space, sometimes, as we mentioned, you need to provide direct instructions, but I want to challenge you to think about how you can compartmentalize the ideas that you present. So you should really be thinking that video instruction for students should be no more than 5 minutes. And that doesn't seem very long, particularly when you're in a webinar like today, where we'll be going for over an hour. But 5 minutes, statistically, is about all students can engage with. So if you had a 20-page PowerPoint that you would like to present, it might be that there are 6 key concepts. And so you would then create 6 small videos, 1 video per concept. This does a couple of things. It makes the individual concepts much more accessible so that students don't need to watch an entire hour video to find the one concept that they're missing. It becomes a little bit like an index where they can refer. It also enables us as a teacher to track which videos get the most clicks, the most views, just like on YouTube. And we can then identify where students are reviewing, which ones don't get reviewed. And that tells us something about our students and what they might need more rehearsal or practice with. Students, of course, can create the videos themselves. So this resource on your screen is called Loom. It's a free piece of software. Obviously, many of you will have your own. I have presented this here because it's a free and easy option. If you haven't created videos before, it allows you to create a screencast. So you can actually have, for example, your student's piece of writing on the screen with your voice talking to it at the same time, which can be much more personalized. Students can then reply to you in a video format as well. And we ask them to do the same thing. Keep it to 1 concept per video and make sure that they are short and to the point. We're trying to get them, as Gillian mentioned, we're trying to get them to focus on those ideas of the thinking that they're involved in. So design thinking, STEM thinking, competencies, 21st century skills, enterprise skills, all of these terms need a space for them to be expressed. And so videos is one way to do that. On the next slide is something that perhaps you have had a go at, which is online group work. And often it's a challenge because in a regular classroom, we can say, find a group and work on this task, and the students engage and off they go. They know the practice, they're engaged in the routine. In the online space, we still need to create opportunities for that type of peer-to-peer interaction and learning. In Zoom, which is a very popular video conferencing software that many use, but also in something like today's WebEx that we're using, they have something that is called breakout rooms or similar. Some are called subgroups, some are working parties, there's all sorts of different names, but they all do basically the same thing. They enable you to take a large group of people and put them into smaller groups with a dedicated task. It's in the virtual space, we think about it as virtual rooms. So we're all together in a room at the moment, but we can create separate virtual rooms for each of the small groups that we want to create. And each of those rooms, virtual rooms, can be moderated by the teacher. A teacher can jump in and out as you would in a classroom, moving between groups of students. It gives students a space in the virtual that they are in charge of, that they have autonomy over. And it means that every student is asked to engage. For example, with our 1,242 attendees that we have currently, it would be impossible to have a discussion with that many. But if we put everybody into groups of 6, for example, it suddenly becomes much more manageable, and we've brought everybody into the conversation. So please consider how you might work with Zoom or breakout rooms or online group work in general, because that is one way to encourage the peer-to-peer interactions that we need to support so that they can demonstrate these thinking skills we're all about today. On the next slide, is something that perhaps you've seen before. And this is a tool called Padlet. And later on in the presentation, you're going to have a go at playing This One Works. But what I want to talk about is this idea of collaborative brainstorming with multimedia. There are many tools to do this. Padlet is one that's popular, but there are others called, so you might use something like Miro. There's all sorts of things like Bubble Us and Poplet give you kind of a concept mapping approach. All of these are free resources that sit there on the internet, ready for you to use, and can be used on any platform as well, which is increasingly important. So it's a single space that is shared by the learners. Again, it offers us an equality of voice. And what I mean by that is, in a classroom, you may have some students that speak up more often than others, who are more willing to ask questions, who are always the first to put their hands up in response to a question. In the online space, we can enable everybody, even the quieter students, or those who don't think as quickly. Yeah, and what we're asking is for their considered thought, not necessarily their first thought or their quickest thought. And so if we look at Padlet, it enables you to embed all sorts of ideas. So you can have video embedded here. You can put documents, PowerPoints, Word documents. You can link out to any other resource. You can obviously have images. But then the bonus of this kind of resource is that it doesn't just sit there like a physical pinboard in a classroom. You can actually then do things with these resources. We can start to categorize the ideas. We can move things around, and we can say, these have a similar theme, or these ideas seem to go together, or this one is an outlier, and why is that? And so it gives a space to share ideas and then go deeper into the ideas as well. So if you're wanting to engage in physical education class, or science class, or geography class, and you want a space for students to demonstrate what they're thinking and how they're making connections between content, something like Padlet that is collaborative brainstorming and collaborative categorizing is a really interesting way to go. So those are 4 ideas for how the online space might be leveraged to engage students in STEM thinking practices. I'm going to hand over now to Hazel, who's going to talk a bit more about planning and design for STEM thinking. Hazel.
Thanks, Jo. So I'm assuming people can hear me. So I'm Hazel. So, and now that Jo has shared some strategies for online learning, I would like to talk about our 4-step model for design learning and STEM thinking. So we developed this planning and design learning called PEDAL for short, PEDAL model, together with Southeast Asian teachers and education leaders. There are actually 2 parts to this model, the teacher planning part and the student learning part. And shown here is the student design learning part to help students design using STEM thinking. So I'll just quickly walk through the 4 steps. So in the first step, which is shown in yellow, students are given a problem or a challenge in a real-life context, and they work in teams. They start with finding more about the problem, empathize with the people involved, and analyze the problem. Then in the next step shown in red, okay, the students use STEM thinking, HOTS, which stands for higher order thinking skills, the knowledge and the values. Oh, okay, my voice is breaking, is it? Can you hear me better now? Is this okay? I'm not sure.
It's still a little hard to hear you, Hazel. Maybe you might need to lean in a little bit. It might be just so many people wanting to hear.
Sure. Can you hear me? Is it better? I'm not sure. Maybe I'll lean a bit closer. Is this better?
That does sound better. Thank you, Hazel.
Yep. Okay. I'm not sure why. Oh, who? Oh, okay. Maybe I can change my my phone. Okay.
All right, let's test out.
Ah, that sounds much better, Hazel.
Is this better?
Much
Is this
better.
better
Thank
now?
you. It is much better. Yes.
Okay,
Thank
so maybe
you.
I don't need the headphones. Maybe it's the headphones that is the problem. Is it better? Okay, sure. Well, technologies, I think we have to be flexible and always troubleshoot a little bit with technologies and be okay. Yep, thanks. Thanks for the chat. I think that's very good feedback for online. That's an example for online learning. You always get the feedback, so it's good to hear you in the chat. So as I was saying, we designed this PEDAL model together with Southeast Asian teachers and school leaders, education leaders. So there are 4 steps to this PEDAL model, and this part is the student design. Okay, the process for student design rather than for teachers planning. We actually have 2 parts to it, but we're showing you the student design part. So the first part, which is shown in yellow, and I'm repeating this, it's empathize. That's what you see on the first step. So this is when we present the real world context or the problem, the situation to the students. And the students start with finding out a bit more, okay, about the problem, empathize with the people involved, and also try and analyze the problem. So in the second step, which is shown in red, the students start to develop the design. So they start to apply their STEM thinking, which, we talk about inquiry. Gillian mentioned about inquiry, critical, creative thinking, higher order thinking skills, which is HOTS, or their knowledge and values brought in your teaching subject, bring that into their design. So they start to think about it and start to develop the design. So in the third step, they create the model. So that's shown in green. So where they start to build and test and improve their model through trial and error. So they could get ideas from other people, or as they build, they can give each other feedback and comments to try and improve their model. So, and then in the last step, they propose the solution. So they try and use the communication skills, they try and write down something and present their solution to others. And these others could be their peers in the classroom, could be to the school, could be to their parents, or even to the community or to the public. So students could also present their solution to the public, such as putting up stuff, like a video, create a short video and put up in the school website, for example, to share their solutions with others. So this is basically the 4-step PEDAL model. So as teachers, right, we can do some of these steps online. So I mentioned about presenting the short video or picture, but we teachers can also present the short video or picture to show them the situation or present the problem. The students can get visual feedback from each other to improve their model. So this could be also done through like the poll everywhere that Joe has shared just now. Or online brainstorming group work that Joe has shared. So this sort of overlaps with the tools that Joe has shared. So you can make use of these in giving students the task and letting them use that 4-step model. So next slide. So let's use this PEDAL model for an activity. Okay, so you will go through the first 2 steps of this model in today's session. Basically, it's a taste because we have such a short time. The task is to design a tool to collect face masks that are thrown away carelessly. So as we know, in COVID period, we use a lot of face masks. And besides the cloth mask, a lot of people also use the disposable surgical face mask. And what do you do after you finish using them? So people throw it away, right? So you can throw it into the rubbish bin, and or at home or outside. And in Australia, what happened is that we throw rubbish into the rubbish bin, and this is at home. So once every week, the rubbish truck will come, okay, and pass by your house, and they will use a mechanical arm to collect your rubbish bin and
tip it into the rubbish truck. So I'm not sure about your country and what's happening in your situation, but if the wind blows quite strongly, it could just, or the plastic bag breaks. So it's very easy for disposable face masks, which is so light, right, to fly away. And you can sometimes just find this face mask thrown away face mask just on the ground, you know. So in this case, we have to pick it up. Yes, we have to pick it up, and you know, we have to do it in such a way that we don't expose ourselves to danger, because we have to assume that the masks are contaminated. So how can we pick up these masks without putting ourselves in danger? So that is the task. We have to design a tool to collect the discarded face masks. Okay, so this can, you know, this activity can be used in social science, civics, geography, sustainability, disaster management, and even literacy, numeracy. It could be used, you know, you can link this to your subject areas, just like, for example, procedural writing on the creation of the tool, economic costs of the mask disposal, biology of disease transmission, etc. So that, you know, you can, it's up to your creativity to link this task to your subject area. So in the next 5 minutes, you will have to design a tool to collect the discarded face mask. Okay, so this is the hands-on part. Think of what you will need if you're a worker or a volunteer collecting this contaminated mask. Put yourself in their shoes. This is the empathize. Okay, empathize step. Draw your initial design on pen and paper. So, which is the ideate, okay, part of the second step. You have to try and think about it and develop your design. So I'm assuming that you have your pen and paper with you. Okay, if not, please quickly grab something and try and design in this 5 minutes. Okay, so I won't be saying too much. I might be thinking aloud a little bit together with my colleagues. So Joe, Gil, and Jared, please chip in if you have anything. Think about your design. Think aloud a little bit. But I will be a bit quiet. Let's be quiet a little bit while you try and draw something. Come up with the design for this tool. Design a tool.
Design a tool. So I can modify and improve an existing idea. Can I, Hazel?
Yeah. The idea is to design something that is not pre-made.
Okay.
You want something that it's already there. So you can make use of other people's ideas. Yeah.
Or maybe a scoop. Okay.
Maybe a claw, like the game claw thing. But I want to be standing up. I don't want to bend down all the time to collect the mask. So
no, you would get a sore back.
Yeah.
Joe?
I was just going to mention, I know we look at things like Rube Goldberg machines and how different kind of mechanical engineering elements connect together. And I think I wouldn't mind thinking about, where do all these masks end up? I know around us, we have found them in kind of the runoff, the rain runoff. So they tend to collect in one particular area. And so if there was a machine that could be constantly kind of picking them up that had multiple parts, that could be really interesting.
Yeah. What else? What other features or things did I need if I'm the one picking it up? I want to be safe.
You want to be safe, so you don't want the germs coming off the mask and becoming airborne for you to breathe.
Yeah. Maybe I need something to contain it.
Maybe you need to wear a mask. A mask to pick up a mask.
Yeah.
Have a beam, have tongs. Yep.
Yeah, and I think people could look around where they're joining us from today and see what's in the room that might give them some inspiration. They might have some scissors, or maybe they finished lunch and they have a fork, or some kind of household items that might be useful. What have you got there, Gil?
Oh, it's hard with the background. I have a tissue box.
Oh, okay.
It's a box.
Oh yeah, that box could be useful because it would contain things.
I also have a white plastic clamp.
Ah.
That
looks like something when you order technology, it comes in the box and it's kind of part of the packaging. Is it something like that?
Yes, it could be. But it's got a nice space. I wonder what could fit in that space.
Yeah.
I'll keep looking on my table.
Cassava bag. What's cassava bag? Yeah. And
guess
then another, if you like, you can also put, share it in chat with everyone. So it's okay to, instead of just private message me, you can share that.
Yes. Sabina has printed something there.
Chopsticks. Someone's going to pick it up with chopsticks. Very good.
Good idea.
Oh, I like a chat comment. I'm weak at drawing, but I can imagine. The trick, you will have many students weak at drawing, but can imagine. Get them to draw anyway, because that will improve those skills.
And the design is different to the skill of drawing too, isn't it?
Yes.
So we're doing, we're designing and doing a plan or a diagram. So that can be as simple or as complex as people are comfortable with, really.
I'm not good at drawing. I just scribble.
Yes, we've got a robot vacuum.
Oh, I like
that. Thing is
that's a great idea.
Okay. Somebody else said they would create a compost pit. So that's interesting. Not sure whether you can see the different, points. I've got people messaging me or messaging everyone. Yep.
Yeah, it's good if they click everyone, isn't it? Message everyone so we can all share your fabulous ideas.
Yeah.
A barbecue stick to pick up the discarded mask is used in the Philippines, in Cebu City. A barbecue stick, would that have 2 points maybe? And you stab? Is that a barbecue stick?
Yeah, like a giant fork maybe.
A fork for toasting marshmallows.
Yeah. Leanne has an interesting suggestion that includes some motivational thing where they beautiful bins to collect them, and you get a 1 cent payout for each mask you return.
Oh, okay.
That's some really, really good kind of cross-curricular thinking there.
That would go very well with numeracy, mathematics, economics.
Yeah.
Sustainability and environment, obviously.
Oh, yes. That's a good point, Joe. So many of the activities and tasks that we could do using the design, using STEM thinking, fit with sustainability. It's such a powerful pedagogy. Sustainability problems that are hiding, waiting to be released in everybody's different subject areas.
That's right. Eric is suggesting a reverse vending machine. You put masks in and you get pennies or candies out. Oh, that could be very popular.
I will go with the candy, but then
thought you might.
I wonder what my dentist would say. Oh, okay. Could we make it a chocolate machine? I love chocolate.
We could.
Oh, hang on. No, we're talking the ASEAN region. I think the chocolate would melt. Okay, candies it is. Candies it is. Okay.
Yeah, I can see we've got a lot of ideas, and
these are wonderful.
Yeah, pretty good. And yeah, so many ideas. So we can see what you have, and you're also creative.
Ah,
So
yes.
cool, you know. So that's the fun part for a teacher as well. When you use this process and give a task to your students, you'll be amazed at the different things that your students can come up with and the creativity that they show. And for us teachers, we also have to be prepared for different things that will blow our minds away with our students' responses. So that's quite interesting. I hope you do continue with the design if you're drawing something out, and think of something that's not pre-made, or maybe improve on existing design if there's already something used in your local country or region. So, so what you've gone through here, right? Basically, it's a taste of the first two steps of our pedal model. Okay. You will see the yellow and the red steps. I think we can show the next slide. That's in the next slide. Yep. So you can see that that's the first two steps. You got the taste of it. Because it's only 5 minutes, and we did some thinking aloud, and we came up with a lot of ideas. Well, of course, we have to then extend this further and give your students the chance to develop the design further and create the model, which we won't have time to talk about today. And remember that this process is cyclic. It can go backwards. So it's not just a linear process. So let's reflect a little bit on the first two steps to make sure that we understand the problem, and also for you to share your ideas further about your design in a more, what do you call that, structured way, because right now everybody's put, or people have put their ideas onto the chat, but we might miss something out. We may not have time to collect everything together. So let's use a collaborative brainstorming activity using Padlet. So next slide, please. I'm wondering whether people know about Padlet. If you've used that before, I'm not sure whether you can do like the hands up or something just to show that you have, used Padlet. Yep. So here we have a link to the Padlet website, and I think Joe will help to put this link into the chat box for everyone. Or maybe you have done so, because I haven't scrolled up.
Yep, it's already in there.
Okay.
And you do get 5 boards, 5 free Padlet boards with a free account, and you can recycle them. So if you delete a board, you can put a new one in. So that's one way of making it continually free, or at least cost effective.
Yeah, cool. So let's go into the Padlet link. So what you can see here is 3 columns. So this was what we designed. Like there's a certain structure. For each column, there's a question. Like, what is the problem asking you to do? That's the first question. Second one, what are the main considerations for your design? So I think some people have talked about that in the chat. And what knowledge do we need to solve this problem? I think this wasn't touched upon, or maybe we haven't started thinking about that yet, but this is the opportunity to add your ideas to this Padlet. So if you go to the link, and you can click plus underneath the column to add your ideas. And if you see somebody else with the same idea as you can just click the thumbs up button to like it. This is so that we don't have too many repeat posts onto the same column. Yeah. So let's see what you have. Nice work.
So I think Kim, our host, is going to scroll up a little bit so that we can see on the screen what people are adding. Checking on the actual link itself, I can see we've got a lot of great ideas coming through already. So thank you for those, and we will certainly be collating all of these. Hopefully, can you see them? Not yet. So let me pull out a couple of the ideas for you, Hazel. So the main considerations that people are putting up are about environmental friendliness, about considering available resources, hygiene and safety.
Yeah. Cost effective.
Yeah, cost, availability of materials, easy to use and durable, and won't be easily broken. So there's some crossover there. Biohazard, safety, and sustainability. Yeah.
Do we want something that is durable, like washable, or do we want something that's disposable and biodegradable? That's another consideration as well.
And I noted in the chat that a couple of people said, why don't we just eliminate single-use masks?
In the first place.
In the first place, yeah. But of course, there are some professions where that's just not possible. For the medical professions, particularly.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's a way to recycle the mask, because the mask has different layers and different functions. So yeah, that would be something else that's interesting. And masks that that talks about mask design, but that's another problem entirely. Slightly different problem.
Yeah.
And design. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was going to read to you some of the contributions from the knowledge that we need to solve the problem. And we've got things from how long microbes last in masks. So you could bring your science work into that. You could bring mathematics into that. How are they discarded at the moment? So that would be some research data collection. We need to know about the application of robotics. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
How do we sustain cleanliness of the surroundings?
Physics.
We need to have simple mechanics. How do we, this is an interesting one. What are the pros and cons of each idea? So there's that critical approach to thinking that Gil was talking to us about.
The reflection, very important.
Yeah. Community involvement. What do our family and friends think? And how do you get people engaged? Is another area of knowledge. Sanitizing, getting robots to do the dirty job. How to adapt nanotechnology, which that sounds fabulous. That's so right up my wheelhouse.
In terms of the level of knowledge, it can go up from primary, secondary, or even tertiary level. So that's quite cool. So we can see so many different ideas, and do keep adding on new ideas or thumbs up for those ideas that you agree with or you've thought of as well. So let's get back to the slides then.
While that's loading, Hazel, I want to point out that someone has suggested we train squads of monkeys to go around and collect the masks. I think that could be quite fun.
Talk to the animal rights.
Yeah.
I don't have a monkey. Oh.
Yeah, or maybe you can do something like as you walk the dog, you can, there might be something attached to pick up the. I'm not sure, but anyway, we're brainstorming an idea, and there's no idea too small or too far out, because who knows, we can incorporate some parts of the ideas into the final design. So cool. So I hope that this gives you more ideas to improve on your design, because I'm sure when you look at some of these ideas, you realize, hey, I didn't think about that. I could add that into into my design. So your design is not over yet. You have to go through the 4 steps. So part of the STEM thinking is also that there's no one correct answer. As you can see here, involves like real life problem or issues. You have to try different things. There's no one correct answer there, or multiple solutions. You can keep improving on it. So your first try or your first design that you've just drawn on your piece of paper, it's it can always be improved on. It's not perfect. It's okay. We should be happy with it. Happy that we should be happy and comfortable that it is okay and it's always evolving or improving. And that's part of the design thinking and the STEM thinking. So as teachers, we have to encourage and inspire in our students the love for creativity, critical thinking, curiosity, to learn and try different things, to be comfortable with not getting it right the first time. It's okay, So next, we'll show you some design that we've come up with. So that, yeah, creative, friendly. So you can see we are not like fantastic, drawers, and this is actually not to scale because it's the first draft. Your first draft may look something like this, or or even more draft. I mean, it depends on your, on everybody's different. So so you can see here we have two designs. So one design is sort of long with a shield and like a dustbin, kind of dustbin inspired to collect the contaminated mask. And then there's a trigger and a string to open and close the claw for it. And then for the other one, the other design had a cylinder with poison antiseptic liquid to spray on with a face shield to cover, and protect the user. And you can see the fingers are there, so that's where you hold it. Yeah. So these are two different designs. I mean, I'm sure you have your own designs. I hope this gives you some confidence and to try and draw something and then share it with us. So in the we want to follow up on your design, okay? Near the end of the session, we'll give you the QR code and a website to get in touch with us and share your design. So you can create a mock-up of your design. So here I have a mock-up of, see here. So this is a stick with a dustpan, which I just use a box and the claw. So if I pull the string, technically speaking, it will trigger. The claw will move, collect the mask and pick it up. So that's sort of like the first mock-up. As you can see, it's very draft. We just use whatever we have at hand, and simulate, picking it up. Yeah. So so that was, we had a lot of fun trying to create that first mock-up. And I'm sure you do too. You can grab a friend or family to try and create something and then take a photo or video explaining the features of your mock-up, of your tool, and then we'll give you a link that you can post up at the end of the session. So yeah. So that's the next step after that, which is to build that prototype, and then after that to share it with others to communicate your proposed solution. So I think next I will hand over to Jared, who will link and summarize the ideas together. Okay. Jared?
Wonderful. Thank you, Hazel, and welcome everybody. It's our pleasure to be here working with you all this afternoon. And a lot of people have been messaging, thanking us and Austrade for being able to put on this event. And it's certainly our pleasure to be able to work with such dedicated educators. So on this diagram that's here on the slide at the moment is linking the three big components that have been talked about this afternoon. So it's now my opportunity to go through these different parts of the presentation this afternoon and link them together about how they can enhance your online STEM pedagogical practices for supporting your students. So I'll start at the top with our STEM thinking. And at the top of that diagram is a screen grab from a previous slide from Gillian, how it situates STEM thinking as opposed to STEM. So it's that middle of that intersection that we're interested in and talking about and integrating that type of STEM thinking into your subjects and into your practices. So it's different from STEM as the science, technology, engineering practices and the mathematics, that we're focused on that STEM thinking. So what is STEM thinking is how we're starting this conversation. And it's that notion of being critical, creative, and how we can go about teaching those types of skills to our students, to be able to solve problems in particular contexts and that are culturally relative and that are specific to a scenario and a situation, which leads into a big consideration of STEM thinking, which is collaboration, and an opportunity for students to explain their ideas and an opportunity to defend their thinking. So we know that collaboration is an important and a key consideration for STEM thinking. But an issue that we're facing at the moment around the world is being able to collaborate in an online environment. And at Monash University, we've been teaching online since March, and we've had to implement a lot of these practices that Joe was talking about. So if I go down the left-hand side of that triangle diagram that's on your screen at the moment, that we're thinking, okay, we appreciate the STEM thinking and what it is, and we understand that collaboration is a key part of it. So how do we go about doing that online? Well, the strategies that Joe talked about, the 4 strategies, those are particular ones that we all use in our own practice. For example, the short videos. If we're unable to collaborate in an in-person, face-to-face way, then being able to use those type of short videos can be a useful way to express concepts, express ideas in a shorter, punchier way that still elicits that collaboration. And same with the poll everywhere type of style. So these types of activities, these types of modes of promoting collaboration online, they promote flexible thinking. And as students are working in these types of environments, we're promoting that higher order thinking skills. We're also allowing students to become reflective, and we're also eliciting some metacognition as these students start to think about their own thinking and start to think about others' thinking. So that whole idea of collaboration, we know from real-world experiences and real-world environments that it's fundamental, that it's important, and we know as well how important it is for STEM thinking. The pedal model, which is down the bottom right-hand side of that diagram, that is a way to enact STEM thinking. That is a way to put STEM thinking into practice. And I'm so glad that the example my colleagues were able to talk about was the picking up a disposable mask. 1, because we know that it's an issue, and 2, when I went for a walk at lunchtime today, I had to walk past a mask sitting on the footpath. And then seeing all of the ideas populate in the chat there showcases how everyone is thinking about this in different ways. And when I was thinking about it, as everyone was putting their thoughts into the chat and I was responding to some questions, it made me think of the street sweeper that went down our road the other day and how something like that could be used. Or when I coached tennis, how when students hit tennis balls everywhere, we had a big cage that we'd just walk over and drop on top of the tennis balls and we'd just pick them up underneath. So it made me think of those types of things. But really, that type of model allows us as educators to put STEM thinking into our own subjects, make it culturally relevant, and make it scenario focused in our particular context. Particularly starting with the yellow part of that empathy and empathizing with a particular situation and an issue. So in our case, we were talking about the COVID mask issue. In your situation, in your local context, you'll be able to identify a particular problem, a particular issue, that you'll be able to use that STEM thinking within your subject, within your curriculum, and within your local context. And then we go on to that red part of that panel model, that panel diagram. And then it's that red part that's when we see our STEM thinking really go into action. So an example to show and elicit that type of thinking was the Padlet that Jo just had up on her screen. How you were all able to collaborate in this way, showcasing that STEM thinking. Now, it's these 3 components, as they work together, that are able to enhance your online pedagogy for using these STEM thinking and STEM practices to support your students and support your students' learning outcomes and support your student outcomes in your particular subject, in your particular domain. And another point that I just made in my notes that I wanted to touch on was going further down the paddle model. One part of that is then being able to present the ideas that you've thought about or present the model that you've made, which then ties nicely back to Joe's notion of online collaboration using short videos, where students would be able to make a short video of what they had designed or what they were thinking, their thinking processes, their actual model, their working prototype, and be able to showcase that to other students. And so we see that cyclical nature of how these ideas are integrated. So based on these key considerations that we've talked about and how they contribute to your online STEM pedagogy to enhance your students, is on this next slide, I'd like you to consider this idea of reflection. Now, the top right of the slide is a quote from Professor John Loughran, who was the Dean of Education at Monash University and retired last year, about this: experience alone does not lead to learning, and it's reflection on the experience that's the key part. So what we're asking you to do is reflect on your learning from our session this afternoon, as we've all been so privileged to be able to work with you and share our ideas about STEM thinking and online collaboration to support your students. So this grid down the bottom is an opportunity for you to think reflectively about the information that you've heard tonight. And a common question that was asked of me in the chat was about getting a copy of the slides. And so after the presentation, you will receive a copy of the slides and recording, as well as some electronic handouts that we've created for you. And based on that information and what we've talked about to you this afternoon are these 4 things: head, heart, bin, bag. So what is something that's been presented this afternoon that's really made you think? It's made you think about your online STEM practices or online STEM pedagogy and enhancing online collaboration. Heart. How do you feel about the information that was presented? Bin. Was there something that was presented that you disagree with? And then bag. What's something from this presentation that you're going to be taking away? Now, I'm conscious of our time this afternoon working with you all. And I'm very grateful of all the questions that were populated in the chat. And I apologise if I was unable to get to your question, that I've been able to record a number of them and some themes to put to our panel. So I'll take this opportunity now to put a couple of the bigger ones to our panellists. So one of the questions to my STEM education colleagues here was around assessment practices. Now, first of all, a number of people brought this up, which is fantastic to be thinking about assessment, because we all appreciate the key role it plays with the planning and the teaching. And so a lot of the questions were around the notion of, particularly with the paddle model and then the online collaboration space, is where does assessment fit in and how could assessment be done?
Were you directing that one to, Jared?
Oh, sorry, I saw Gil's microphone come up.
Oh, go Gil.
Okay.
Sorry, no, you don't have to, Gil.
No, I'm happy to respond to the assessment, and especially within the paddle model. The assessment for anything to do with STEM needs to be authentic. It needs to relate to exactly what it is that you, the teacher, values about the activity. So, for example, if you had a group of 6 students designing and building their device for picking up the mask, you might be thinking, they're working very well as a team. They're collaborating. Or they're thinking out aloud. So it's those sorts of things that you would be assessing. So the collaboration or the idea of team participation, if you're not sure how to assess that, go and ask the sports teacher. How do they assess the teamwork on a basketball team? How do you assess the discussions? Go and ask the language teacher. How do you do that in debating? So it's looking at the particular skills that you want to develop and that you want to value, and that's what you assess. If you are not interested in how beautiful the picture is, their design, then don't assess it. Just look for the communication ideas. And the students then will know, okay, I don't need to be a brilliant artist so long as I can communicate my ideas. And so it's very much observation, looking and listening to what the student is doing. There was no exam.
Yeah.
Authentic. Jo.
Thank you. I'll just add to that because I agree with everything you said there, Gil. In the online space, criteria, success criteria for activities are really important. And they are usually a dot point of key skills or understandings that students will be able to demonstrate by the end of the learning experience. And that can be really helpful in the online space, particularly if you offer it to the students in advance, so that assessment is not a secretive process, so that they have the clear expectations in the form of success criteria as they begin their project, so that they can see if they're working towards those outcomes. And so, as Gil has said, we can't use traditional testing in this kind of assessment space. We have to think a little bit more critically about what actual invisibles that we're trying to have students demonstrate, and the tasks that we present should engage them in that work.
Yep. So yeah. So just to add on, since so of course you have to think about your own the content that you want to sort of you want your students to learn for your subject area, and the skills, like what Gil said, what you value. You value critical thinking, creative thinking, or collaboration, and then you have your rubrics and success criteria. You also can think about self-assessment and peer assessment. How do you want the students to sort of assess their own work, or their peers' work, or the other group's work, and so on. So that's sort of promoting their metacognition and their learning as well. So I just add this point. Yep. Thank you, Jared.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone, for sharing your insights there about assessment and how this fits in. And I think this year in particular, with the online space and how a lot of education people have been forced into an online space, it really brings up these important discussions about assessment, particularly about what are we trying to assess and why are we trying to assess. So I appreciate all of your responses there. I've got a couple more for our panel, and I might actually answer this one, this quick one myself. It had just recently come in about making this online learning work for students that might have limited internet connectivity. And we know that this is a problem. I mean, personally at home, my internet completely went yesterday, and that was just part of what happens. And so in the handout that we're going to be providing with you, at the top of that is a diagram that some colleagues and I published, and it's important to consider using synchronous and asynchronous activities and how activities can be used with students when they are not online. For example, this type of paddle model approach that could be used to set students up and then ask them to go away for some time and be able to work on that in a different style. So it does rely on some creativity from the teacher's point of view. Certainly there is a pragmatic issue there around limited internet and internet dropping out and various other things that we've all had to deal with. And sometimes it's just going back to thinking about what's the purpose, what are you trying to achieve, and then thinking how are you going to be able to achieve that. And just following on from that, another question, and Joe, I might get you to address this one first because I know about your online background, is about how to motivate, in particular, how to motivate students who may be reluctant to collaborate in this online environment, particularly teenagers.
Yeah, so it's the same in the classroom, right? It's the same often in the physical space as in the virtual. In the virtual, though, it's easier to hide, as we know from our teaching experience online. One of the ways you can support students to actually engage is to develop milestones in their learning experiences in the online space. And so what I mean by a milestone is they might have 3 tasks to do, and the second one is the one that you're going to be checking and that you are going to be using to map their progress. Or it might be, so instead of giving feedback just at the end, they have small points to engage with. They might get a virtual badge, or you might send them an animated GIF, or you might say, go you finished section AB, so that we break the learning into chunks and we think about it as progression forward, not necessarily towards an ultimate end goal, because learning does never end. So think about things like milestones that you can build in, and also think about if it's in a group situation in the online space, you actually have to be a lot more direct with your students than you do in the real world. So in a real world, like we mentioned earlier, you can say, right, get yourself a group of 3, off you go, I want this done by the end of the lesson. In the virtual space, you need to say, I'm choosing, you don't need to, but it can help to say, I'm putting you in groups of 3. One of you is going to be the recorder, one of you is going to share a screen, and the third one is going to be the summarizer. And so every person has a clear role, so that there is no way to kind of avoid the work. So if it's asynchronous, I suggest milestones, building in milestones. If it's synchronous works, well, like today where we're all on together, consider group work that has very specific roles for each member of the group.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for that, Jo. And I certainly, working with adults, I find sometimes they are reluctant to collaborate, particularly at the start of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of towards the end now, as we get into this later months and they've only got a few weeks left, that sometimes they're a little reluctant. But I've found anecdotally, one, it's based on that relationship and that building that classroom climate and that classroom environment where they feel safe to be able to share ideas. And then I've also found, like you're suggesting, breaking into smaller groups. I've found if I ask a question with 20 people online with me, often there was just dead air, silence, and no one wants to talk. Yet if I put them into a breakout room with 4 students and then I go around the breakout rooms, then they're quite chatty and quite open to talking to each other. But
yeah,
okay.
one other quick tip that we've been using a lot during COVID is, instead of saying, what questions do you have, you get much more specific and direct, and you say, in your group of 3, you need to come up with 2 questions. And so that actually encourages the interaction between the peers, and there's a very clear outcome. And so their milestone in that is the 2 questions that they then push back to the rest of the group.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jo. And a question here for Hazel or Gil, because it's particularly about the paddle model, and it's the relationship between the paddle model and the design thinking by Stanford, and also the design thinking competencies, which I know they've more recently adopted. And some just general question and discussion about what is the relationship between those?
We actually developed the paddle model with Southeast Asian teachers. And so in that process, we actually showed them different models, because there are quite a few different types of models out there, particularly the Stanford design model, as you mentioned. So, so what we came up with was something that is that we think is relevant in the local sort of regional context that teachers can use. And Gil, you want to add on?
Yeah, we located on the internet about 58 different models, if you like, for this type of work. We then selected 15 of them and took them to Penang, where we were at Semio Rexam. And over 4 days, we unpacked each of those models. We trialed, I don't know how many different design activities, and slowly we built the paddle model. This is only half of it, but we built it on the basis of what the participants, and I think there was 85 people, what they considered was achievable in the average ASEAN classroom, which are very different to the Western classrooms. And that's why we don't go, when we're working in the ASEAN region with Rexam, we don't go with a Western model, because the classrooms were too different. And so the model that we used tonight is only half of it, today rather. That's the design model that the student would use in the classroom, and it's very simple. We actually have another half of it that is the teacher planning model that the teacher would use to design their lessons in order to give these learning experiences to the student. So you've looked at it this afternoon from the student perspective. There is another part of the paddle model that is for the teacher in an ASEAN classroom to design the actual learning experience as well. But we can share that with you if you want as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Gillian. And another question that I've seen pop up in the chat a couple of times about the paddle model, and some of the information that we've talked about this evening is how it relates across different year levels. And I see that Joe's just popped in a comment there about using some of this work with 4-year-olds. And I know, because my own son has been doing online learning over the last little while, and he's 6, their school has been adopting some of these approaches as well. So I think that fundamental understanding of why we're doing it remains the same, but the how might look a little different. So in your particular context with your particular students, you might be changing some of those smaller details about how you're working with them. Now, as a panel, we'd like to thank everyone for sharing your insights with us this afternoon and asking us all of these questions. And we do apologise that if we were unable to get to your question. But from all of us at Monash Education, we'd like to thank you all for this opportunity. And we've enjoyed working with you all this afternoon. And I'll now pass over to Elodie.
Thank you so much, Jared, and many thanks to our Monash University academics, Gillian, Joe and Hazel and Jared, for really a fascinating session. It was just great to really see so many creative and friendly, as was noted, ideas that were already shared. And certainly I think this session was so timely in terms of the current context that we're all living in and working in. So the aim of this webinar series is to support our ASEAN teacher friends with practical tools for an even more effective and engaging way to deliver education and knowledge to students across our ASEAN region. So as you've heard before, to maintain engagement across this group, Monash University is actually inviting you to share the tools that you've developed in the coming week. So on the slide, you will see a QR code and a link where you may upload a JPEG file of your created tool. Kindly see the file naming instructions on the screen for reference. You might want to use technology right now and actually take a screenshot of this so you can refer back to that QR code and that link. So we're close to being out of time now. So for any questions that were not answered today, please send these to the Monash University Faculty of Education using the same link and QR code. And for any other questions, feel free to get in touch with our ASEAN teams in Indonesia and the Philippines. Their contact details are right on your screen. And they can direct you as well to some of their colleagues in some of our other ASEAN countries as well. So thank you again so much to all of you for participating in today's webinar and being with us for the last 90 minutes or so. As we've mentioned, a handout of the presentations that were presented today will be sent to everyone after the webinar series is completed. We really want to invite you. There's 3 more webinars coming next. All the details are listed on this page, and you can register on our austrade.gov.au website. So hope to see you all at the next session tomorrow. And again, thank you so much to our colleagues from Monash University for kicking off this series with us. We truly appreciated this fantastic session. So, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us. Thank you.